Welcome to my dungeon keep, for I am the dungeon master, and my eyes do see all. And here we shall look at our cult's greatest heroes and truly see if they are worth that of a legend, worth being made as an RPG.
Welcome to As an RPG, a show where I go through the tedious effort of translating characters from shows, movies, and games into Pathfinder characters. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I'm not the best player when it comes to Pathfinder, so I expect to make a few mistakes here and there. But with a little help from my friends, we can come up with a pretty decent mock-up for a character. For this episode, we'll be turning Star Butterfly into a proper Pathfinder character. Being the titular character of the Disney show, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, made by Darren Nevsky, Star is a chaotic good princess who goes on an array of crazy adventures, all the while battling enemies, injustice in her kingdom, and her own personal problems. Now, I've been pretty excited to dive into this character. She's bombastic, has a bunch of wild powers, and has a sprawling world to dissect. Point being, there's a lot of material to work with here. In order to get into the meat of this character, we'll have to start by looking at what she brings to the table, bit by bit. Now, Star Butterfly is no slouch when it comes to bringing the heat. She has a large arsenal of spells, fists that bring the pain, and a can-do attitude that keeps her going. Along with that, she has a magical wand that's immensely powerful, and the enemies she's defeated throughout the series are proof enough. But how powerful is she? In fact, what class is she? What's her level? Well, let's dive into it. To no one's surprise, Star is a magic caster, so we can eliminate a few classes off the board. But what kind of caster? A wizard, a magus, there's some feasible suggestions, and to be honest, sorcerer is the frontrunner for some time. For one, Star Butterfly is a part of a royal bloodline that inherits a wand, along with fantastical abilities. Those of the butterfly lineage gain a Mewberty form, a state in which they grow 4 additional arms, wings they're proficient with, and control over raw magical energy. Initially, this form causes them to act unconsciously and do things out of primal instinct, but as time goes on, or as they level up, they gain even more control and the ability to create portals. Putting the wand aside, those are textbook sorcerer bloodline traits. For any other PC or NPC, these abilities alone will put someone around 9th level or so, and that's lowballing things, but we'll get into her level later. As of now, we haven't quite established what her class is. While we made a solid argument that would lend her towards a sorcerer, that doesn't fit her entirely. We'd have to look at how many spells she has, how they're prepared, if at all. And this is where things got a tad difficult. Now, looking at the wiki, you could say Star knows a rough estimate of over 121 spells, 114 of which she made. This number far surpasses the 54 spells that even a level 20 sorcerer would know, and that's just the listed wiki spells. This doesn't even include all the spells made by her ancestors in the book, which there really isn't even a number to be known. While bloodline abilities are a good suggestion, they alone aren't enough to really mark her a sorcerer. This kind of number would better imply a wizard since they technically don't have any limitation to spells known, but there is one key to turn from her being a wizard: preparation. Upon watching the show, it's pretty clear Star casts spells willy-nilly with no regard of limited uses.
Narwhal Blast! Narwhal Blast! Aww, Narwhal Blast.
She'd cast Rainbow Blast multiple times, and few wizards would waste spells that blatantly. So that left me in quite the stumper. Until my friend brought up some key details, namely her book and her relationship with it. He led me to the Arcanist class. So, just to list some key details about an Arcanist. They have an imbued bond with their spellbook. They can prepare any spells that aren't recorded in said spellbook. They also prepare spells by level slot and not by name, allowing them to cast the same spell multiple times per day, and have both Arcanist reservoirs and exploit that give them sorcerer bloodline abilities. These characters line up rather well with how the butterfly lineage works. For example, this would allow the character to know an unlimited number of spells, similar to that of a wizard. And, just like an arcanist, Star loses the vast majority of her spells she has access to without the spellbook. In fact, when her book was destroyed, she had to begin making a new spellbook just to keep track of what she knew. Spoilers. I will say, there's a bit you have to fudge around, as Star doesn't really prepare spells, and they never really stated before she has the limited use she can cast per day. But I can't really say I've ever seen her cast more than 15 in a single episode. Even during the debut of her spell, Spider with the Top Hat, while it's insinuated she exhausted her spell list, we only saw her use offensive spells. So, for the sake of game functionality, we can assert that she has a limit of spells per day. With all that said and done, we can claim that Star is officially classified as an arcanist. That's progress. Now, while I would like to leave it there and continue on something else, I kinda have to insist she's actually multi-classed. While Arcanist is where she's placed most of her levels, I'd argue she has a level or two in a particular martial class, the Barbarian. I know it sounds weird, but I'll make my case. While Star got all of her cast levels from her mom, Moon Butterfly, she clearly had to inherit something from her dad. From what I've seen, her dad is a big burly man with unbelievable endurance for pain. He's adept at roughing in the wild, taming animals, and can throw a mean punch when it comes down to it. And this man taught Star everything she knew about fighting before she even set hands on the wand, before she could even cast spells. Now, a little bit about barbarians. They have an ability called Rage, which grants them rage powers. Along with that, they're proficient with martial weapons, along with medium armor, and have an ability called Uncanny Dodge that prevents them from being caught flat-footed. While in their rage form, or while raging, a barbarian gains increased strength, increased constitution, more hit points, but cannot use skills that require dexterity, charisma, or intelligence. From what we see of Star, she's got a handle of most common weapons, is prone to strike her enemies in a fit of rage, can take a decent hit or two, and is fairly nimble on her feet. Taking all the skills a barbarian is proficient with, along with her uncanny dodge ability, this is a rather decent fit, though there is one glaring issue. Barbarians can't cast spells while they're raging. Rage prevents them from using any ability that requires them to concentrate, and it's hard to imagine Star not using her spells, unless she loses her wand. While there are possible builds that allow one to quick cast spells while raging, I'm not too concerned about it. While Star does have martial training, I'd only say there are about 2 levels at most in the Barbarian class. She only defers to using her bare fist or weapons when she's depleted of magic. The main reason for insisting she has Barbarian levels is because there was a gap of time before she received her wand, and I think it's reasonable to say that she probably would have gotten some kind of Barbarian level from the different kind of camping traps she does with her dad.
It's time to learn how to be one with our surroundings. Voila! The ancient skill of camouflage. But before you start, you must check every leaf carefully.
But this is more speculative than anything else, so if you have an alternative class suggestion, by all means leave them in the comments below. Moving on to the next big question. What level is she? I actually found this one relatively easy to answer. There was a particular parameter I used to gauge her experience. Her spells. If you're roughly familiar with the wizard and sorcerer spell lists, you'll have a general gist of how strong you have to be to accomplish certain magical feats. Interested in changing a person's arm into a tentacle? Perhaps looks into monstrous physique. Want to change your teacher into a horrid ogre? Baleful polymorph. Surprisingly, a lot of Star spells fall under transmutation. Back to the point, the majority of her spells are surprising around 3rd or 4th level, and there are only a few that would actually peak up to 5th. The titular one being Rainbow Kaiju Battle Armor. That's a mouthful. This was the best spell I could use as a guiding rod to describe her level because she didn't get the spell until the season finale. This is by far one of her most potent spells, and it's at the capstone of what magic she can do. For those looking to use this in-game, I would best describe it as a newly made spell, via the creation spell rules. It would be like a modification of Righteous Might under the Abjuration school. Thankfully, the Star Wiki has her spells categorized by schools of magic that are close to that of the Wizard Sorcerer spell list. This made it far easier to get a gist of how strong her spells were, and what schools they would belong to. Honestly, the comparisons are so uncanny that I wouldn't be surprised if they used Pathfinder or D&D as a model. Some spells are pretty easy to translate, for example, Spider with a Top Hat. It's pretty much Magic Missile. There's also Rainbow Blast, which you could say is a variant of Scorching Ray that uses force instead of fire. And then All-Seeing Eye, that's just Scry. Some others would take some spell creation or DM ruling to get into the game. Personally, I'd say Warnicorn Stampede, it's most likely a high-level variant of Summon Swarm. The only thing that made this relatively difficult to sit on was how strong Star's spells were from the very beginning of the season. All the way back in the first season, the episode entitled Matchmaker, Star turned her teacher into a troll. As I suggested earlier, this would be a textbook case of Baleful Polymorph. The problem is that it's a level 5 spell. If I were to imply that Star only reached level 10 as an Arcanist by the series finale, how in the heck could she cast something so powerful early on? Well, there's the big elephant in the room. A small, wand-shaped elephant, in fact.
Your wand.
It's the wand. It's the wand I'm talking about. So, from the get-go, the show lets us know that the wand is immensely powerful, and not only grants anyone who wields it the ability to cast spells, but create them. Seriously, go up and check. There are spells made by characters who've only wielded the darn thing once, and have never cast magic. Keeping this in mind, Star's ability to do magic is heavily influenced by her wielding said wand along with possessing the spellbook. When both are lost, she essentially had to start over and cast spells from memory, and her spells aren't nearly as potent until the final season. I suggest that the wand could be considered a magical artifact that grants caster levels. After all, Luda wanted this thing from day one of the show, so I'd be willing to believe this thing allows you to cast spells above your pay grade. Along with that, the wand has an interesting ability. Upon the caster speaking a horde spell known as the Whispering Spell, the wand explodes in a titanic amount of force capable of leveling a castle. Specifically, the spell destroys pure magic. But the wand is a conduit to the realm of magic, so tomato tomato? When thinking of how to translate this explosion to the game, my friends and I had to come up with some reasonable comparisons. Initially, we compared this mechanic to that of Necklace of Fireballs. It's a magical item in Pathfinder that holds several beads that can be thrown and cause spell-like destruction similar to that of a fireball. The most powerful variant you can buy can deal up to 348 points of damage. That's some serious firepower to consider, but keep in mind, this wand is capable of leveling a castle. As seen in the episode, Storm the Castle, Star speaks the spell's incantation, where upon finishing, it does in fact destroy Ludo's castle. Keeping this destructive power in mind, a warship in Pathfinder has over 1,200 hit points, and that thing can fit inside his castle. So, the question became, what amount of damage can this thing actually do? Luckily, we came to a resolution. Instead of trying to imitate the explosive force, we found a way to represent its destructive force. In game mechanic terms, the spell would take 2 rounds and a standard action to cast, because it literally takes about 15 seconds by the show's timing, and the single round takes up to about 6 seconds. After one additional round, the wand would summon a sphere of annihilation upon itself, 180 feet in diameter, then expand by 60 feet for 3 rounds and disappear. So, if you're not familiar with Sphere of Annihilation, it's an item that a lot of players rarely come in contact with, but it's serious business. Anything that comes in contact with it is utterly destroyed, and only the intervention of a deity can undo such destruction. It may be overkill, but the show makes it known that using the Whispering spell is a huge commitment. We wanted something that would mirror the conviction one has to go through just to consider this an option. Although, should you survive, you get the benefit of having a new one take its place with a sneak new model. With all this said, I think we can officially say that this would be a good idea of what Star would be as a Pathfinder character. However, I could be wrong. To be honest, there's a few things that I kind of left out. For one, I didn't really get into the talk about what, say, a human would be or what kind of racial traits you would get from that. Along with that, I didn't really get to go down her skill list. Really, I just had to kind of find a way to cut this script down so it's not too long, because there was a lot I had to get into. But what I did do, to kind of give you guys a gist of everything else, is I left a rough draft of what her character sheet will look like, along with a mock-up of her spells list, a skill list, and feats. Give it a look and tell me what you think. What do you like? What would you change? And most importantly, what would you like to see next?